The CEO stepped into the airport terminal, her heels clicking softly against the polished floors. The morning was bright, the sunlight spilling through the tall glass windows, but she barely noticed it. Her mind was on the flight ahead, on the few hours she could steal for herself before the week of meetings and negotiations began. She had planned to spend some time in the VIP lounge, a quiet space where she could relax and collect her thoughts before taking off. She moved with purpose, her posture straight, her face calm, even though inside she carried the weight of constant responsibility. People passed by, some glancing at her with mild recognition, not fully knowing who she was, while she moved through the crowd with practiced ease. As she approached the lounge, she felt a sense of relief. The sign above the entrance promised comfort, peace, and space away from the chaos of the airport. She stepped in and immediately noticed how quiet it was compared to the bustling terminal. The room smelled faintly of coffee and polished wood, a comforting combination. She smiled lightly to herself as she scanned the area, seeing plush chairs, soft lighting, and a few people scattered around, engrossed in their own worlds. It was exactly what she needed. The lounge staff recognized her immediately. She had been a VIP member for years, and her presence was familiar to them. A young attendant approached, smiling politely, ready to assist her. She returned the smile, showing a warmth that was natural, not forced. She appreciated the staff when they were professional, and she had always treated them with respect. Today was meant to be simple, a moment to sit and breathe. She handed over her membership card, and the attendant nodded, leading her toward a comfortable seat near the window. The CEO settled in, letting out a small sigh as she sank into the chair. It was a rare moment of calm, and she allowed herself to enjoy it. She pulled a magazine from her bag, flipping through pages without really reading, just letting the quiet wash over her. Then, a sound from the entrance broke the peace. Voices raised, sharp and demanding, and the CEO looked up. A white passenger had entered the lounge, visibly agitated and insisting on immediate service. The way the person spoke carried a tone of entitlement that made the CEO's skin crawl. She watched as the lounge staff, usually confident and organized, hesitated, their expressions flickering between discomfort and confusion. The CEO's eyes narrowed slightly. She could already see where this was going, but she hoped she was wrong. The attendant who had welcomed her looked toward her, an awkward hesitation in their movement. The demanding passenger insisted on a particular seat, one of the most comfortable spots in the lounge. The staff glanced at the CEO, and for a brief moment her heart sank as she realized they were considering moving her to accommodate this stranger. She felt a strange mix of shock and disbelief. How could this be happening? She had spent years proving herself in the business world, earning respect, leading a company, and yet here she was, being questioned, moved aside, simply because someone else demanded it. The situation seemed surreal. The CEO tried to stand, but the staff gestured for her to remain seated. The young attendant stammered, apologizing, trying to explain that there was a complaint. The CEO's lips pressed into a thin line, and her eyes held steady on the staff. She remained composed, her body calm, though her mind raced. The demanding passenger, noticing her hesitation, smiled smugly, clearly pleased with the discomfort they were causing. It was a moment that made the CEO feel both powerless and furious. She thought about how many times she had faced subtle biases in her life, small instances of dismissal or underestimation, yet this was blatant, public, and humiliating. She was asked to move to a less comfortable chair, further away from the window and the natural light she had enjoyed moments ago. Her hands tightened around her magazine as she slowly rose, keeping her voice steady when she spoke. She politely reminded the staff that she was a VIP member, that this treatment was not acceptable. The staff murmured among themselves, their discomfort evident. One of them avoided her gaze while the other glanced at the demanding passenger, torn between policy and appeasement. The CEO felt her calm resolve slowly hardening into determination. She would not let this moment pass without addressing it, but she knew she had to act carefully. Sitting in the new chair, she took a deep breath, forcing herself to remain composed. She noticed the smirks and glances from the demanding passenger, but she refused to react. Instead, she reached into her bag and quietly pulled out her phone. She began recording the interaction, documenting the staff's actions and the passenger's behavior. Every hesitant step of the staff, every dismissive glance, every instance of favoritism was captured clearly. She knew that evidence was crucial, not only for her own accountability but to prevent similar situations from happening to others. While she recorded, she observed the other guests in the lounge. Some had noticed the commotion, but most pretended not to see, absorbed in their own activities. A few glanced with curiosity, and she caught one older woman giving a small nod of sympathy. It was a small gesture, but it reminded the CEO that she was not entirely alone in this experience. Even in the face of blatant unfairness, there were people who recognized right from wrong. The CEO reflected on the irony of the moment. Here she was, a woman who had built a successful company, led a team of hundreds, and earned respect on a global scale. Yet a single privileged passenger could cause a public display of discrimination in a place meant for comfort. The injustice stung, but beneath the sting a quiet determination grew. She had faced challenges before, and she had always responded with dignity and action. This would be no different. She would ensure that this situation was addressed, that accountability was demanded, and that her experience could serve as a lesson for others. Minutes felt like hours as she sat in the displaced chair, recording, observing, and collecting her thoughts. She rehearsed what she would say, how she would respond, and how she would escalate the matter. She reminded herself to stay calm, to avoid letting anger dictate her actions, and to focus on the facts. Her mind worked through every scenario, analyzing the best approach to ensure justice without unnecessary confrontation. She felt a strange mix of exhaustion and empowerment. The humiliation had arrived, but so had her resolve. The demanding passenger eventually settled, satisfied with the disruption caused, while the staff continued to fumble quietly, unsure how to proceed. The CEO watched, her calm exterior hiding the growing intensity of her determination. She knew that once this moment passed, there would be consequences for the staff's actions, and she intended to see them through. She allowed herself a small inward smile. Moments like this tested not just patience but leadership, resilience, and the ability to act decisively in the face of unfairness. As the announcement for boarding drew near, she quietly ended her recording, saving it securely on her phone. She stood, collected her belongings, and straightened her posture. The CEO was ready to move, ready to act, and ready to turn this moment of injustice into a demonstration of accountability. The VIP lounge, once a place of comfort, had become a stage for a quiet but powerful display of dignity and resolve. She walked toward the gate with measured steps, calm on the outside, focused on the actions she would take next. She knew the situation was far from over, and she was prepared to see it through to the end. After being asked to move from her seat, the CEO remained calm, but her mind raced. She had never experienced such blatant disregard for her status in a VIP lounge, and the mix of shock and anger made her heart pound. She took a seat in the less comfortable area, facing a plain wall instead of the large windows she had been enjoying moments earlier. She could feel the eyes of the demanding passenger lingering, almost as if they wanted to see her discomfort. The CEO took a slow, deep breath and reminded herself to stay composed. She had learned long ago that maintaining calm was more powerful than reacting in anger. As she settled into her new seat, she noticed the other guests in the lounge. Some were pretending not to see, their eyes darting occasionally toward the commotion. A few looked curious, and one older gentleman shook his head slightly, a small expression of disapproval at how the staff had handled the situation. It was a reminder to her that there were people who recognized what was happening, even if no one spoke up. The CEO quietly reached into her bag and pulled out her phone, deciding to capture the situation on video. She knew that documenting the behavior of the staff and the passenger would be important if she wanted to address the injustice later. The young attendant who had escorted her to the new seat approached, trying to explain the situation. Their voice was hesitant, apologetic even, as they stammered out reasons for the switch. The CEO listened politely, her face showing a calm neutrality, but inside she was processing every word. She understood that the staff were likely intimidated by the demanding passenger, but that did not excuse their actions. She realized that people often fail to act correctly when they are scared of confrontation, but accountability should never be ignored. The CEO watched as the demanding passenger settled into her original seat. They leaned back smugly, scrolling through their phone, completely oblivious to the impact of their actions. The CEO's jaw tightened slightly, but she refused to let the frustration show. Instead, she focused on gathering her thoughts. This moment was not just about her. It was about sending a message that discrimination, no matter how subtle or overt, would not go unchecked. She reminded herself that her next steps needed to be strategic, measured, and effective. She began observing the staff more closely. One of them avoided eye contact, clearly uncomfortable, while another glanced repeatedly at the demanding passenger, trying to balance politeness with compliance. The CEO noticed the small details, the hesitation in their steps, the nervous gestures, the quick murmurs among themselves. Every action told a story of fear and indecision. She realized that she needed to approach the situation not only with authority but with clarity. Anger could be understood, but precise action would have impact. While watching, she made mental notes. She planned how to address the incident later, considering what evidence she would need, how to present it, and the best way to communicate her expectations. She did not want to humiliate the staff or the passenger unnecessarily, but she did want to ensure that everyone understood the seriousness of their behavior. She wanted to create a change that would prevent similar situations for others. She reminded herself that leadership extended beyond her company, into every space where fairness was ignored. Minutes passed, and the lounge slowly returned to a quiet hum. The CEO took a sip of her water, her hand steady, her expression thoughtful. She considered the broader implications of what had just happened. Here she was, a woman who had built a company, led teams, and earned respect on an international level. Yet her authority and presence were dismissed in a simple lounge. The incident highlighted the lingering biases in society, the subtle ways people with privilege often assume superiority, and how systems sometimes fail to protect those who have earned their rights. The CEO felt a mixture of sadness and resolve, sadness for the injustice but resolve to correct it. She decided to stay put for a few more minutes, continuing to record discreetly on her phone. She captured the demeanor of the staff, the body language of the demanding passenger, and the general atmosphere. Each detail added to the story she intended to tell later. She also noticed a small act of kindness from another guest, a brief smile, a small nod, an acknowledgement that not everyone agreed with the situation. It was a subtle reminder that fairness was recognized even in silence. As the boarding announcement approached, the CEO began to plan her next steps. She knew that once she left the lounge, the incident would need to be addressed at a higher level. She thought carefully about her approach. She could respond with anger, but she had learned that measured action often achieved better results. She could escalate the situation to management, provide evidence, and demand accountability. She wanted to ensure that no one else would experience the same treatment. Her plan formed in her mind with clarity and precision. When the staff approached to guide her toward the gate, she stood gracefully, her posture perfect, her face composed. She thanked them politely, not allowing the frustration to slip into her words. Inside, however, she felt a surge of determination. She knew that the story did not end here. She had captured everything, and she was ready to turn this moment of personal humiliation into an opportunity for accountability and change. Her experience had reinforced the importance of dignity, calm, and careful action. She walked toward the gate, each step measured, her mind focused on the next actions she would take to ensure justice. On the way to the gate, she reflected on her career, the obstacles she had faced, and the challenges she had overcome. She had spent years building credibility, earning respect and proving her abilities in a world that often questioned her because of her race. Moments like this were frustrating, but they also reminded her why she had to keep moving forward, why she had to address inequalities wherever she saw them. This incident was a stark reminder that no matter how much success one achieves, society still had biases that needed to be confronted. She arrived at the gate, checked in with the airline staff there, and found a quiet corner to wait for her boarding call. She reviewed the footage on her phone, watching the interaction again. Every detail stood out: the staff's hesitation, the passenger's smugness, the subtle shifts of power in the room. She thought about how she would present this to the airline's corporate office, carefully, factually, without letting emotion cloud her message. She wanted to make sure the seriousness of the incident was understood, and that the actions of the staff were held accountable. As she waited, she noticed other passengers glancing at her, sensing her composed yet intense presence. She realized that even without words, her demeanor sent a message, that she would not be dismissed, that she had control over the situation, and that she would ensure fairness was restored. The CEO reflected on the balance between patience and assertiveness. understanding that both were required to handle this situation effectively. She knew that when she addressed the airline, she would do so with clarity, poise, and undeniable evidence. The boarding call eventually came, and she gathered her belongings. Her resolve was firm. The lounge incident had tested her patience, but it had also strengthened her determination to act decisively. She walked onto the plane, took her seat, and prepared for the flight ahead, her mind already planning the next steps. She knew that the story was far from over, and she was ready to see it through, confident that her actions would create meaningful consequences and set an example for fairness and accountability in every space she touched. The CEO settled into her airplane seat, a quiet determination settling over her. She glanced out the window as the plane taxied to the runway, watching the city shrink below her, the familiar feeling of flight bringing both calm and reflection. Despite the hum of the engines and the chatter of passengers around her, her mind remained focused. The incident in the VIP lounge played over and over in her thoughts, each detail sharpened by her resolve to act. She knew that boarding the plane was only the beginning. She had captured every moment on her phone, and now it was time to plan how to address the staff's unfair behavior. The CEO opened her laptop quietly, the screen illuminating her thoughtful face. She began drafting notes, organizing the footage, and preparing a clear account of what had happened. Every hesitation by the staff, every smug glance from the demanding passenger, every subtle act of favoritism was carefully recorded. She knew that presenting a calm, factual account would make her argument stronger than letting anger drive her words. Her fingers moved deliberately over the keys, detailing each step, each action, and each moment of the uncomfortable encounter. This was her strategy to ensure accountability, not just for herself but for anyone who might face the same injustice in the future. Around her, passengers chatted, laughed, or scrolled through their devices, unaware of the tension and determination in the row ahead. She noticed one young man glancing her way, curiosity in his eyes, as though sensing the intensity behind her calm exterior. She allowed herself a small, private smile, acknowledging that even in the silence of the flight there was a presence that carried power and purpose. She reminded herself that her composure was part of the message she intended to send. She did not need to raise her voice. Her actions and planning would speak louder than words ever could. As the flight ascended and the world below became a patchwork of clouds and sunlight, she took a moment to reflect. The lounge incident had shaken her briefly, but it also illuminated something important. Leadership was not confined to the boardroom or the office. Leadership extended into every interaction, every space where fairness and respect were challenged. She understood that her response now could influence not only the airline staff, but the culture within the company itself. Her actions could set a precedent that discrimination and favoritism would not be tolerated, no matter where they occurred. During the flight, she reviewed the footage repeatedly, noting small details that might strengthen her case. She paused the video at certain moments, watching the hesitation of the attendants, the nervous shifting of their weight, the quick glances toward the passenger as if seeking approval. Each moment reinforced her understanding of the power dynamics at play. She realized that fear often guided behavior, but fear did not justify bias or mistreatment. Her responsibility now was to address the situation in a way that would ensure accountability, without unnecessary conflict. She also reflected on the emotional side of the experience. For a moment, she allowed herself to acknowledge the sting of humiliation. It was natural to feel frustrated and unsettled when treated unfairly. But she refused to let those emotions dictate her actions. Instead, she transformed them into determination. Each pulse of discomfort became motivation. Each flicker of anger was redirected into strategy. She understood the power of composure, the ability to act decisively without being clouded by emotion. This was how she had led her company, and it was how she would address this situation as well. Minutes turned into hours as the flight continued. The CEO occasionally looked around the cabin, noticing small acts of human connection. A passenger offering a snack to a child, another helping someone with a carry-on bag. These simple gestures reminded her that kindness and decency still existed even amid moments of injustice. She made a mental note to carry this observation forward. While she addressed the wrongs done, she would also acknowledge the small moments of humanity that continued to exist in the world. She reached for her notebook, jotting down ideas for how to communicate effectively with the airline's corporate office. She planned a call, carefully outlining what she would say, the evidence she would present, and the desired outcomes. Her mind worked through multiple scenarios. One where the airline responded positively and took immediate action, another where they hesitated or minimized the situation. In each scenario, she plotted clear next steps, ensuring she was prepared for any response. Her leadership instincts guided her as they always had, turning a moment of personal affront into a structured plan for justice. The CEO also considered the broader implications of the incident. It was not merely about a single lounge encounter. It was a reflection of systemic bias that could appear in subtle and overt ways across industries and spaces. She thought about the employees in her company, the people who looked up to her for guidance, and the young professionals who might face similar discrimination. This was a chance to make a statement that resonated beyond the immediate incident, a moment to assert that equality and respect were non-negotiable. Her thoughts sharpened with clarity. Action now could inspire change in the culture around her. Hours passed as she continued her work quietly, her surroundings blending into the background. Flight attendants moved through the aisles offering drinks and snacks. Passengers adjusted in their seats, and yet she remained focused. Her eyes occasionally flicked to the footage again, ensuring she had captured every nuance. She thought carefully about the language she would use in her communication, the tone, and the sequence of events. She wanted the airline to understand the severity of the situation, not just as a customer complaint, but as a matter of principle and integrity. Occasionally, she reflected on the personal side of the experience. She had faced challenges before, moments when her authority or expertise had been questioned. Each time she had relied on a combination of patience, strategy, and persistence to prevail. This incident was another test, and she approached it with the same mindset. She reminded herself that dignity was not given by others. It was maintained by how she chose to respond. The lounge incident had attempted to challenge that dignity, but she had reclaimed it through composure and thoughtful action. As the flight neared its destination, the CEO finalized her notes. She organized the footage, wrote down key points to communicate, and mentally rehearsed the conversation she would have with airline executives. She was prepared to present the situation clearly, factually, and without unnecessary emotion, but with the unmistakable weight of someone who had experienced injustice firsthand. She knew that her approach would demand attention and ensure accountability. She felt a quiet confidence, knowing that the preparation she had done would make her argument undeniable. When the plane touched down, she gathered her belongings and prepared to disembark. Her calm demeanor remained, her posture strong, her face composed. The passengers around her were absorbed in their own routines, unaware of the plan and determination quietly building in their midst. She moved through the cabin with purpose, her mind focused on the next steps. The lounge incident was behind her physically, but it remained at the forefront of her thoughts, guiding her actions as she prepared to hold the staff accountable and ensure fairness would prevail. Exiting the plane, she walked with measured steps through the airport, her eyes observing the flow of people and activity around her. She found a quiet corner near the terminal's business center and took a moment to gather her thoughts before making her calls. She reminded herself to remain calm, to speak with clarity, and to rely on the evidence she had meticulously gathered. This was not a moment for reaction, but for action. Her strategy was clear, her purpose resolute, and her commitment to fairness unwavering. The CEO's determination carried her forward as she prepared to contact the airline's corporate office. She knew that the next steps were critical, that her communication would set the tone for the response, and that her actions could influence a broader culture of accountability. The lounge incident had tested her patience and resolve, but it had also given her an opportunity to demonstrate leadership beyond the confines of her company. She was ready to act, confident that her approach would bring justice, fairness, and respect to a situation that had attempted to deny her dignity. This was more than a personal matter. It was a statement about integrity and the expectation that all people, regardless of race or background, deserved equal treatment. After landing, the CEO quickly made her way to the airport's business center, a quiet space away from the noise of arrivals and departures. She found a corner with a small desk and a phone, and she took a moment to organize her thoughts. The incident in the VIP lounge had left her unsettled, but she had also transformed the experience into a plan for accountability. She reviewed the footage on her phone once again, noting the critical details and the moments that clearly showed the staff's hesitation and favoritism toward the demanding passenger. Every clip, every pause, every glance mattered, and she made sure her notes captured it all. With everything prepared, she made the call to the airline's corporate office. She requested to speak directly with a senior manager who could take immediate action. When she was connected, she spoke calmly but firmly. She described the situation in the lounge, emphasizing her status as a VIP member and the way the staff had treated her to accommodate a passenger who was not entitled to the service she demanded. She did not yell, she did not shout, but her words carried authority and precision. She explained exactly what had happened, providing timestamps from the video and highlighting each moment that showed the staff's preferential treatment and failure to follow protocol. The manager on the other end listened carefully, occasionally interjecting with questions. The CEO answered each one clearly, her voice steady, her explanation methodical. She stressed that this was not just a personal complaint but a matter of principle. The staff's behavior was discriminatory and violated the airline's policies. She emphasized that such incidents had wider implications for customer trust and the company's reputation. The manager expressed concern, acknowledging the severity of the situation and assuring her that immediate action would be taken. The CEO listened, then outlined the steps she expected, including a full review of the staff involved and corrective action to prevent similar events in the future. After the call, she felt a mixture of relief and determination. The initial contact was successful, but she knew she could not simply leave the situation to chance. She documented the conversation, noting the commitments made and the timeframes mentioned. Her meticulous attention to detail reflected her leadership style. She approached every problem with precision, whether in her company or in situations like this one. The incident in the lounge had tested her patience and composure, but it had also allowed her to demonstrate her approach to problem-solving and accountability. While waiting for further communication from the airline, she reflected on the emotional impact of the incident. She remembered the shock she had felt when asked to move from her seat, the disbelief at being treated unfairly, and the quiet tension as she recorded the situation. It was natural to feel upset when confronted with discrimination, but she had used those emotions constructively. Instead of reacting impulsively, she had planned, documented, and acted with clarity. She realized that this approach not only ensured her voice was heard, but also established a standard for others facing similar challenges. The CEO also considered the broader message of her actions. By addressing the situation calmly and effectively, she was sending a clear signal to the airline and to the public that unfair treatment would not be ignored. She thought about employees, customers, and young professionals who might look up to her example. This was more than a personal matter. It was an opportunity to advocate for fairness and to influence a system that had allowed bias to interfere with proper service. She understood that her response had the potential to create meaningful change, and she embraced that responsibility. Within a few hours, the airline reached back out. The corporate office had reviewed the footage she had sent and had begun internal investigations. The CEO was informed that the staff involved in the lounge incident had been suspended pending a full review. The manager explained that an apology would be issued and that the company was reviewing its training programs to prevent such behavior in the future. The CEO listened carefully, satisfied with the swift response but still planning to follow up to ensure that promises were kept. Accountability mattered, and she intended to see it through. She took a moment to reflect on the events of the day. From the initial shock in the VIP lounge to the boarding of her flight and the careful documentation of the incident, she had maintained composure and used the situation as an opportunity to demonstrate leadership beyond her company. She thought about how often discrimination manifests in subtle ways, even in places designed to provide comfort and service. Her experience had highlighted no space was immune to bias, and that action was necessary whenever it appeared. The CEO also considered her personal growth through the incident. She realized that even the most successful individuals encounter moments that challenge their dignity. What mattered was how they responded. She had chosen to respond with clarity, patience, and determination, using strategy rather than emotion. This approach reinforced her leadership qualities and allowed her to act effectively in a situation that could have been destabilizing. She felt a quiet sense of pride in the way she had handled the challenge. Later that evening, She received confirmation from the airline that the investigation was complete. The staff responsible for the lounge incident had been terminated, and the airline issued a formal apology to her. Additionally, the company announced a revised training program for all VIP lounge staff, emphasizing equality, professionalism, and respect for all members regardless of race or background. The CEO reviewed the confirmation, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. Her actions had resulted in immediate consequences and meaningful changes in the airline's operations. She also reflected on the broader impact of the situation. The story, she realized, could inspire others to stand up against unfair treatment. By handling the incident with composure, evidence, and strategic action, she had demonstrated that injustice could be challenged effectively. She hoped that others who faced similar discrimination would feel empowered to act, knowing that careful planning and courage could result in real change. That evening, she shared the experience privately with a few trusted colleagues, not for sympathy but to illustrate the importance of responding to challenges with intelligence and strategy. She described the sequence of events, the decisions she had made, and the outcomes achieved. Her colleagues were impressed not only by her resolve but also by her approach to transforming a personal affront into systemic accountability. It was a lesson in leadership that extended beyond business and into everyday interactions. The CEO spent the rest of the evening reflecting quietly, thinking about the future. She considered the systems that allowed such incidents to occur and how individuals could play a role in creating accountability. She thought about the younger professionals she mentored, knowing that her example would reinforce the importance of integrity, dignity, and action. Her experience in the VIP lounge had become more than an unfortunate event. It had become a teaching moment, a demonstration of leadership and perseverance in the face of discrimination. Finally, as she prepared for the next day of meetings, the CEO felt a sense of closure. The immediate situation had been resolved, accountability had been enforced, and systemic changes had been initiated. Yet she remained aware that vigilance was always necessary. Bias and favoritism could appear in unexpected places, and she understood that the responsibility to act remained ongoing. She felt ready to continue her work with renewed determination, knowing that she had handled a difficult situation with grace, strategy, and unwavering commitment to fairness. The following morning, the CEO woke up with a sense of quiet accomplishment. The events from the previous day were still fresh in her mind, but she felt a calm that came from taking decisive action and seeing results. The airline had confirmed that the staff responsible for the VIP lounge incident had been terminated, and that steps were being taken to prevent similar situations in the future. While the personal humiliation she had experienced was significant, the outcome reinforced her belief that fairness and accountability could be enforced, even in spaces where privilege and bias sometimes dictated behavior. She prepared for her meetings with a sense of renewed focus. Each step she took felt purposeful, grounded in the knowledge that she had addressed an injustice not only for herself, but for others who might have faced similar treatment. Her reflections centered on the broader implications of her actions. Leadership, she realized, extended beyond her company and into every sphere where integrity, dignity, and respect were challenged. By handling the incident with composure, strategy, and evidence, she had demonstrated that moments of unfair treatment could be transformed into opportunities for accountability and systemic change. Throughout the day, she received messages from colleagues and acquaintances who had learned about the incident. Many expressed admiration for her calm yet decisive response, noting how she had turned a personal affront into a meaningful lesson in leadership. She appreciated their support but remained focused on the principle behind her actions. This was about fairness, not recognition. She wanted to ensure that the story highlighted accountability, equality, and the need for systems that prevented discrimination. During a brief break between meetings, the CEO reflected on the moments in the lounge. She remembered the shock of being asked to move, the subtle tension in the staff's gestures, and the smug satisfaction of the demanding passenger. Each detail reinforced her understanding of how bias can manifest in everyday interactions. She considered how many people, particularly young professionals or those less confident, might have reacted differently, perhaps silently accepting the injustice. Her response had been shaped by experience, strategy, and the desire to create meaningful change. She also reflected on the human element of the incident. While she had been wronged, She recognized that fear and uncertainty had guided the staff's actions as well. People sometimes act out of self-preservation rather than malice. This understanding did not excuse the behavior, but it added depth to her perspective. Addressing bias effectively required not only holding people accountable, but also fostering awareness, education, and cultural change. Her approach combined firmness with insight, aiming to correct both action and understanding. By the afternoon, she had a meeting scheduled with the airline's senior leadership. The discussion was professional, fact-based, and focused on the steps they had taken and would continue to take. She reiterated the importance of comprehensive training for all staff, emphasizing that fairness and respect were non-negotiable values. The airline representatives listened attentively, acknowledging both the mistake and the corrective measures being implemented. Her clarity and calm authority made an impression, and she could see that her input would influence not just immediate actions but future policies. The CEO spent the rest of the day reflecting on the ripple effects of the incident. She considered the employees in her company, the young professionals she mentored, and others who might encounter bias in professional or personal spaces. Her actions were more than a response to a single event. They were a model for how to handle discrimination effectively. She felt a sense of responsibility to share these lessons, not for self-promotion, but to empower others to act with dignity, evidence, and strategy when confronted with unfair treatment. Evening arrived, and she finally allowed herself a quiet moment of reflection. She thought about the journey from the initial shock in the lounge to the decisive actions that followed. Each step had been deliberate, guided by experience and a commitment to fairness. She felt proud of her composure, her strategic thinking, and her ability to turn an unpleasant situation into an opportunity for accountability and systemic change. The humiliation she had felt initially had been transformed into empowerment. She also considered the broader cultural message. By handling the incident calmly and effectively, she had sent a clear signal that discrimination would not be tolerated. The airline's actions, the termination of the staff involved, and the implementation of new training programs were tangible outcomes. Beyond that, she had demonstrated the power of strategic response, patience, and dignity in confronting bias. These lessons, she realized, were valuable for anyone navigating professional or personal challenges. Later, she spoke privately with a mentor who had guided her through many challenging situations in her career. They discussed the incident, her approach, and the outcomes achieved. The mentor praised her for handling the situation with clarity, patience, and strategic insight. Their conversation reinforced her belief that leadership was not just about business success, but also about influencing culture, setting standards, and creating environments where fairness and respect prevailed. The incident had become a case study in leadership under pressure, and she was proud of the example she had set. That night, she reflected on the journey she had undertaken. From the shock of being asked to move in the lounge, through the calm and strategic response to the accountability achieved, she saw a clear progression. She realized that dignity was maintained not by avoiding challenges, but by responding to them thoughtfully and decisively. Her actions had resulted in immediate consequences, systemic changes, and a message to others about the importance of fairness and accountability. She felt a deep sense of satisfaction, knowing that she had handled a difficult situation with grace and effectiveness. The CEO went to sleep with a quiet confidence, aware that the lessons from the incident extended beyond the immediate events. She knew that bias and unfair treatment could appear in many forms in many spaces, and that vigilance, composure, and strategic action were essential. She also knew that her response had created a precedent, a story of leadership and accountability that others could follow. The incident in the VIP lounge had tested her pay,